Hello there. Trade debt and housing the homeless. We live in one of the greatest countries in the world in terms of production, debt, and waste. The U.S. currently has a GDP of $14.119 trillion. That's almost 3 times that of China. The U.S. also has the ability to be 100% self sustaining in terms of food production, as compared to Japan that can only supply 50% of their own food. America is arguably the greatest place in the world because there are 6.2 million people with a net worth of at least $1 million. Meanwhile, the average family has about $7,000 in the bank. We also have one of the biggest debts in the history of mankind at a whopping $54 trillion total debt and $115 trillion worth of what are known as unfunded liabilities. America also has a trade deficit of almost $340 billion. This deficit has left a huge number of shipping containers left over here because of our low level of international shipping. In other words, we don't ship anything back to China, and therefore these containers are left behind to gather in docks. Eventually, they have to retire these containers, and they get sold off to people on eBay and Craigslist for as little as $1,500 to become affordable storage sheds. However, more and more people are turning these steel and aluminum containers into houses. The concept of the shipping container home consists of stacking these containers together like Lego blocks with the help of a crane, fastening them together, and then cutting out the walls. This is also known as shipping container architecture. There are currently about 17 million shipping containers in the world, and that could comfortably house the 3.5 million people that are currently homeless in America. The next step up from the shipping container home is called a modular home. That is still much cheaper than a regular home and is very well built and easy to assemble. Because of our shaky stock market, the housing market collapse has also given a person the option of buying a foreclosed home. These homes can usually be picked up for as much as half of their real value. On Craigslist.com, you can find people who are willing to share land for exchange for simple upkeep or for other resources such as a shared garden. As you can see, thanks to the internet, there is more of an abundant open access system that is unfolding before our eyes and will continue to take shape in the near future. Self-sufficiency versus dependency. Is it possible to truly be self-sufficient without money? The modern person has more options today than ever before because the capitalist model has encouraged the production of such goods. The question is, how many of those goods does one actually need? Everyone needs food, shelter, and energy. However, nowadays a person needs a job, and that means transportation, communications, education, and the stress that comes along with having to afford these provisions. However, before the turn of the century, these concepts were essentially non-existent. When I started this report, my idea consisted of whether or not self-sufficiency subverts capitalism or not. Well, let's take an objective look at what it would take to be completely self-sufficient. First, let's start with our shelter. As we mentioned before, there are many angles to gain shelter in modern times. Let's just say we get really lucky and find someone on Craigslist that is willing to share the use of their land for the installment of electricity and food provisions. We now have to provide energy and food to this home and to our neighbor. If you find that solar panels are too expensive, you could create cheap energy from a generator powered by burning wood and other forms of biomass. This process is known as gasification. The process of producing energy using the gasification method has been in use for more than 180 years. Initially developed to produce town gas for lighting and cooking in the 1800s, this was replaced by electricity and natural gas. During both world wars, especially the Second World War, the need of gasification produced fuel reemerged due to the shortage of petroleum. Wood gas generators were used to power motor vehicles in Europe. By 1945, there were trucks, buses, and agricultural machines that were powered by gasification. It is estimated that there were close to 9 million vehicles running on producer gas all over the world. Thanks to the concept of electrical deregulation, we can sell our electricity back to the power company. The concept of electrical cogeneration of electricity was later confirmed on the National Geographic episode called Doomsday Preppers. Alternative energy systems such as solar and gasification generators are certainly a worthwhile financial investment. Electrical energy has no choice but to continue to go up in price, and thanks to natural disasters such as earthquakes and hurricanes, it is completely unavailable at times because of damaged power lines. Deregulation of electricity production occurred in the 1990s, and it essentially gives anybody the opportunity to own and operate an electrical power plant. In other words, if you had your own waterfall, oil well, a field of solar panels in the desert, you would have free energy and therefore unlimited income. This concept to me seems like the best investment for our project of becoming self-sustaining. Even at a measly 3 cents a kilowatt hour, a 100 kilowatt generator that ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for grand total of 8,760 hours would net over $26,000 a year. Not too shabby for essentially burning wood all the time. Virginia would also be a great area to try this project out because we have an abundant supply of wood. In fact, it was estimated that Hurricane Irene toppled over 2,000 trees, and that was just the trees that fell on the road. Also, on the National Geographic Doomsday Prepper episode, it was mentioned that 3 pounds of wood equals about 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. The 100 kilowatt per hour production level, which is relatively the same generator shown in the episode, would require about 3 to 4 tons of wood a day, or the burning of a large tree every 24 hours. A big side effect of doing all this burning is that you would have a tremendous amount of ash left over, which would have to be cleaned out every day or so. With this ash, you can make bricks for low-cost construction and could be used to condition the soil for future generation of trees and other plant life. This concept would be ideal for property that already had a large supply of trees, but other biomass could be used, such as weeds or grain that had gone bad. With this system, you would have virtually unlimited heat and electricity for a small neighborhood. This neighborhood can become what is called an intentional community and therefore be eligible for government subsidies. In fact, there are over 6,000 intentional communities in the U.S. alone. The generator could charge electric cars, thus providing a high level of efficient transport. Perhaps one day scientists could engineer a plant that could provide all the renewable biomass to satisfy all our food and energy needs. With innovation and technology, we can live in a world of open access, abundance, and self-sustainment. Aquaponics, the self-sustaining supermarket. Now that we have our housing and energy, we now need a provision for our food source. This can be done with the use of a swimming pool and a little bit of planning and ingenuity. This concept was vividly shown on an episode of National Geographic called Doomsday Preppers, in which there were 4 families preparing for quote-unquote end of the world disasters such as nuclear war and the collapse of the economic system. The first family took an old swimming pool in their backyard and started to grow tilapia fish. Tilapia have the ability to lay as many as 1,200 eggs at a time and therefore grow exponentially, perfect for creating a viable source of protein. After a while of having this set up, algae starts to grow. This also feeds the fish and acts as a filter for the water. Other plant life such as fruits and vegetables were grown as well to balance their diet. They later installed a net on top of the pool so that chickens could be grown and their eggs could be harvested. The chicken manure would feed the plant life and the plant life fed the fish, producing a self-sustaining cycle. The algae could also be turned into a fuel source with the use of a centrifuge. This concept would provide a basic food source with very little investment compared to its provisions and be the supermarket of the future that fits comfortably in your backyard. Beyond the monetary system, my conclusion. As you can see, in the preparing for the doomsday scenario, these families essentially subverted the need for money because they were making all their own goods and became self-supporting. The time for self-sufficiency has come. There's no longer a need for a market system as long as you are willing and able to produce your own goods and services. You would no longer have quote-unquote unlimited options, but after a while of living without those options, your values would probably change. You would no longer have the need for retail therapy because you would no longer have to deal with the stress associated with the modern monetary system that we are currently forced to engage in because of our artificial need for unlimited options, quote-unquote. The cost of this system would be very affordable as well. In fact, if a college student were to put all their student loans into what I call the Doomsday Project, they would no longer have to be stressed out about finding a job after they graduate, and it would be possible to pay back the loans with the electrical cogeneration. The people occupying Wall Street should just leave the city and start over with the production of this system in mind. Instead, they loiter on the streets of the wealthy and beg for a job, or better yet, financial reform. This is nonsense and will never accomplish anything. However, if we boycott the system and start providing for ourselves, it would be the ultimate act of civil disobedience, and the system would have no choice but to change for the better. As you can see, the monetary system started out innocently enough with the trading of grain and gold and evolved into a complex and shaky stock market system, and soon it will be an imploding economy. I say we have evolved beyond the monetary system technically, socially, and spiritually, and soon we will be sailing blissfully into the promised land that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. so eloquently spoke of. The end.